Welcome to West Coast Biased. I'm Andrew Nemec, joined as always by Jason Suke. Suke, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. It's a hell of a week of college football. That very rarely do you get these kind of big matchups that live up to the hype, and they all did. It wasn't just one. I mean, both Oregon and Penn State and Alabama, Georgia being on at the same time. How about you? I had to go split screen, had the volume up on one, but it was even Washington, Ohio State, which didn't turn out to be like a nail biter. It was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. So I just thought it was a great weekend of college football, which I love because I love the sport.
It was a rough weekend for me because we had the Friday night Oregon State game, and I'm also obviously covering high school football. Yeah. Saturday, all-day football, and then Sunday, I watch everything. So the game that started at 6:30, I got up at 7, so I missed a little bit of it. But then you watch through Sunday night because that ended in a 40-40 tie.
Yeah.
I watched at least 10 hours of football, both Saturday and Sunday, and watched 4 hours of football on Friday.
Get your
lot of football.
Get your NFL Plus package, and then you can watch games in the all-22 and condensed, no commercials, no talking.
God.
And it's less than $15 a month, and you can watch those games literally in like 20, 25 minutes, and more if you don't, if you know what happened. So I'll be perfectly honest. I'm even wearing my Kells Irish shirt. I was not waking up to watch the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings. That's just, no offense, but old ass Aaron Rodgers and Carson Wentz is not waking me up. That started at 6:30.
6:30. It's football, man. It's football. Yeah. It's real football. Let's turn it on. Let's see what's going on.
In a shocking development, I went out drinking after I went out drinking. Oh, what? Friday night. Yeah, I went out drinking on Friday night, and then it's possible that I was out on Saturday night as well. So, yeah, there was not going to be one of those me waking up at 6:30 for those morning slate games.
So we taped a live stream right after the Duck game. And then I got on the phone with a former running back wide receiver coach, and we spent 2 hours going over plays from the Oregon Penn State game, looking at film.
Yeah.
So I felt really good. I got to bed at like 12:30, got up at 7, started watching football again. There's a reason you say I'm a total nerd. You talk about my sports pants being tight, man. I spent a good 4 hours after the Duck game breaking down, whether it was with you or on the phone, looking at tape and going back and rewinding plays. It was a good football game.
But I will be wrong a million times. I've been doing this for 20. I just passed this last weekend. Me and Isaac Rapp, primetime 105.1 The Fan, 3-7. We just passed our 20th anniversary. We had our 20th anniversary last week. Wow. And so I've been doing this show I've been doing primetime for 23 years, 20 with Ropp. I did it for 2.5, 3 years with my former partner before that. So that was kind of a fun little thing. I want to just give Ropp a shout out and pat on the back there. So I will be wrong a million times. Like when you're paid to give an opinion, and you know me, I try not to be hot takey. I'm not one of these guys that jumps to wild conclusions. I try to be measured. I try to make sure that my opinions are based in something, and I will be wrong a million times. But every now and then, God, am I right? And I've been saying it for 3 years, and people are going to try to cover it up because the fourth quarter into overtime, Drew Aller is ass. And I don't know why we're trying to make
we keep starting like this. This last week too.
It bothers me. I've been saying it for 3 years, and it bothers me.
I don't think he's ass. I think he's ass.
I went and listened, because I try to listen, right? I'm a groupthink guy. I'm interested because, again, to say that I'm the smartest one in the room, if you think you're the smartest one in the room, I can assure you are not, right? So I always try to gather other opinions. In the amount of people that are trying to sprinkle bark dust on that pile of crap that was his game for 3.5 quarters, it just – Penn State's offense is ass. It was ass. It is ass. It will be ass. And Drew Aller is not a good quarterback. We can get into the rest of the game, but I'm planting my flag.
Clearly.
I'm sorry. One throw when you get behind someone, and it was a nice throw, one throw and then a couple of slow-ass scrambles does not make a quarterback. Drew Aller in Penn State's offense in big games don't show up, and I will stand by that. But yes, it ended up – we went from what we thought was going to be a laugher into that fourth quarter and the 1,000 cuts and it's donezo till we ended up with a classic. And I'm glad because I do not want to come on here and I didn't want – I know we did like an hour and a half. I didn't want to come on there and talk about how disappointing Penn State was and Oregon looked great, but how good is Penn State? No, you got two heavyweights slugging it out. And that was a great college football game. And if you want to know how intense that was, go listen to Dan Lanning's post-game press conference afterwards on the field. My God, maybe switch to decaf. That dude was fired up, and that's when you know it's a good
Cocaine was a coach. It would be Dan Lanning.
Well, they say like if
so
you want to win, like seriously, if you want to win a national championship, find a psycho. When's the last time a non-psycho won a national championship? Honestly, like if I was hiring, and by the way, there's some good jobs out there, right? Like Virginia Tech's open. I was trying to look. I saw a list today of jobs.
I know you're really excited about that UCLA job.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, right. UCLA's open, Arkansas's open, Virginia Tech's open. Like, there's some actual real jobs that are open. Arkansas just blew out Pittman. My first thing would be when I'm interviewing someone is, are you a psycho? Do you scare me a little bit? You know, sometimes like you meet someone and you're like, whoa, like it's a lot. You kind of have to like take a step back and like, if you're not a psycho, I don't want you. I want psychopaths. And this is in the most complimentary way. Dan Lanning is.
Does this extend to your dating history, by the way?
It's possible. Look, I like a little.
I want a psycho.
Well, look, every now and then, like, you know, you'll see like a news story. We had one of these, like, I don't know, it was like maybe 6 months ago. And some gal, she was poisoning her husband. I think she was trying to poison him with like antifreeze or whatever. And it was really bad. Yeah. But then we saw the mugshot and I was like, I mean, I'm like, that just means she cares. It means she's passionate. It means don't piss her off. And I'm sorry. Like when I look at James Franklin, who seems like a nice man, who seems like a measured man, I don't want it. I don't want I don't want me as your coach, right? I'm a pretty measured person. I'm not too high. I'm not too low. Often I get yelled at by my significant other to care more. People all the time, why don't you care more? I'm just not. I'm pretty even keeled. And James Franklin seems even keeled. I don't want even keeled. I want Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning just walk, just red face. He just 1,000 cuts. I want that. I want the psychopath. I want this. Kirby Smart's a psychopath. Dan Lanning's a psychopath. Dabo Sweeney is a psychopath in his own way. He's a religious zealot. You telling me that guy couldn't start a cult somewhere? Just psycho.
Yes.
I want psychopaths. So if I'm hiring, if you're UCLA and you're hiring, Deshaun Foster, too nice of a guy. No, psychopath. Modern college football requires a psychopath. And Dan, I'm convinced the reason why Oregon won and Penn State didn't, besides the fact that Oregon has a quarterback that is an ass, Dante Moore's really good and Drew Eller's ass, psychopath. Psychopath versus non-psychopath. Psychopath wins.
Lane Kiffin at like 2 a.m.
Psychopath.
tweeted below a tweet of Wicks throwing up on the field, and there's rumors that he's dating Lane Kiffin's daughter.
Well, it's not rumors. I mean, they put it out.
And they just said tempo, something like tempo kills. And it's like, dude, you're at 2 a.m. trolling your daughter's boyfriend.
I love it.
Psycho. We will get to listener questions later in this episode where we are going to talk, obviously, about this Oregon-Penn State win, what this means for the program going forward, a little on Washington, a little on Oregon State, the entire deal. But I want to start with, I asked Dane Brugler, who I think is the absolute best NFL draft journalist, what his thoughts were on Dante Moore.
Yeah.
And he said, Dante Moore has been awesome. The stage wasn't too big for him Saturday night, and I love how he's making big plays in and out of structure. It's still September, but if he continues playing at this level, Moore will be in the QB1 mix. And you know as well as I do, if you're in the QB1 mix, 1, you're leaving, and 2, you have a chance to be the number 1 pick. And I think if we're going over the Oregon-Penn State biggest takeaways, we've talked about the arm talent that's been present. We said, how would he look when he was heated up? Both in structure and out of structure, he looked phenomenal. When he was knocked off platform or taken out of platform and had to throw on the move, he looked incredible. I think my biggest takeaway is Oregon enjoy Dante Moore while he's here, because there is a chance now, even if you say you want to season guys and Bo Nix was, the most snaps ever, and then Dylan Gabriel was the most starts ever, there's a chance that Dante Moore bucks that trend and is gone sooner rather than later.
Well, in all fairness to Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, Bo Nix, by the way, is having a nice start to his NFL career. I think there's a ceiling on where Bo Nix is going to be, and I think you're starting. Right. I think you're seeing that. He's fine, right? He's going to be a starting quarterback in this league, and whether he takes a step and becomes Brock Purdy and is one of those 10 to 12 guys, or whether he settles into more of a solid starter, but isn't really in that. He will be a starter, right? And
he'll be between the 12th and 18th best quarterback in the NFL most of his career.
I would think so, right? But hey, it's early, and maybe we saw some flashes, but And then Dylan Gabriel's a backup, smart kid, good locker room guy. He'll be a backup. He's not going to be a starter, right? take this away. The reason why anyone that breaks records in college football, chances are they're not an elite NFL prospect, because elite NFL prospects don't stick around. So we get Bo Nix, who plays all that football, Dylan Gabriel, who plays just as much, and Bo Nix wasn't terrible at Auburn, but played a bunch of years at Auburn, got starts, comes to Oregon, 2 super productive years, borderline Heisman Trophy stuff. Dylan Gabriel, 3 places, good at every single one of them. Dante Moore is going to play 1 season at Oregon and more than likely is gone. And that's all you need to know. I mean, it just guys that have it, that have all of the pieces don't stick around. They just don't. I mean, sometimes you get a late bloomer that has to stay for a while, but when it pops, it pops. And when and again, I'm done taking my shots at Drew Aller. Okay, I promise. I hate the national narrative where we.
You
try
sure
again.
about that?
I listen to so much national narrative again where we're making excuses for the kid, and he's not a bad kid. He's just not a good quarterback. But he's not a great quarterback, and I just think he's a very average quarterback. And if you draft him, good luck. Have fun in the NFL, Drew. But when you see a guy that's now going to be in college for 4 years in Drew Aller, and then you see Dante Moore, who started 7 games at UCLA, which that was a death sentence, and now you see him in Oregon. The stark difference between those 2 players, and look, that is the difference in this game. And I know Thieneman makes the big interception, and I thought Oregon was really good in the line play. I thought they were better than Penn State, which to me speaks volumes, because I think that's as physical a team as you're going to play. And I thought Oregon did a very good job up front, even if some of the tackle situations there and some of the non-holding calls. Can we also say, thank God that the Big Ten decided not to throw holding penalties? Because
I noticed that.
Dude, that was like, I was like, whoa. Like, I can't tell you that. I mean, it must have been double digits. And by the way, this kind of goes both ways. I think Oregon certainly had more of it, but Penn State had it too, where there was at least 10 or 12 plays that were significant plays that I was like, well, this is coming back because that's a clear hold. And if I'm seeing that sitting there on my couch and I know I'm an old lineman, I'm like, whoa. But the difference in this game was Dante Moore versus Drew Aller. It just was. Dante Moore is a significantly better player with a third of the starts. I mean, anyone that's watching that says that Drew Aller and Dante Moore are playing the same position, they're just not.
They're in a different tier.
They're in a completely different tier. And even though it's early on with Dante Moore, dude, NFL teams, and like I said, going in, he's bigger than I thought he was. I remember seeing him at UCLA and thinking, and again, you're a freshman. I know he's not small of stature, but he looks grown up. Something happened over the last 2 years, and you kind of grow and you develop. He's thicker. I mean, I think they listed him at what, 210, 215, and he's 6'3". That's a big kid who moves real well, the arm angle. So yeah, that to me that was one of the big differences that stood out. I thought Oregon was just more athletic. I think Oregon was a better team. I said Oregon was going to win all along. I thought they should have won comfortably. And then it was like, whoa, Nelly. But at the end of the day, the biggest difference between those 2 teams that stood out to me was simply that. Watching Drew Aller play and watching Dante Moore play, there was a stark difference in their play and just their overall ability. And that's the difference to me between Dante Moore will not be a 3-year starter at Oregon. He just won't. Unless he just decides that he loves college and hates money, he will be gone. So enjoy him while you can.
Andrew Luck came back when he could have been 1-1. It happens. It
Absolutely.
happens. I mean,
and
Justin Herbert came back. So guys do come back, and Oregon has a long history of that. Peyton Pritchard came back. Sabrina Ionescu came back. Justin Herbert came back. They have a history of that. So there is
coming back for 2 more.
There is a possibility he comes back for another year, but just pure talent wise, he doesn't have to. And I think that's the big takeaway. The other play I wanted to, or the other big aspect I wanted to break down was Dylan Thieneman's last play. We talked about Oregon running the 4-2-5, cover 2, letting Dylan Thieneman kind of freelance. If you watch that play again, one, great job by the defensive coaches. You could tell, I hadn't even seen Dan Lanning's comments, and I knew from that play that they'd scouted that out and seen that coming. Yeah. The other thing that's really funny is you can screenshot it, and I just flat out watched the video too to make sure it wasn't just a screenshot. Dylan Thieneman, before that snap where he gets the pick, hides behind the official. Yeah. And they're in a 4-2-5 where he's the robber, and he's allowed to kind of just read and react. And he was in a spot where, and Dan Lanning talked about this, they knew they could either throw the flat, and then he's kind of unaccounted for, and you would set up like a 2nd and 11 because he could get there so quick. They wouldn't have the blockers. They wouldn't have the numbers. Or if they threw that wheel to the tight end, he could potentially be in a spot where he could go up and get it. And Thieneman hides behind the official, leaks out that way, and sure enough goes and gets it. That's a great job by the coaching staff. It's also what Dylan Thieneman is for. That's why you go and get a guy like Dylan Thieneman so that he can be in that spot. And you have to be a pretty athletic safety. We've talked about that even in games where he wasn't great. We've talked about plays where he got to the sideline from the middle of the field to break up a pass and then also came from the opposite side and blew up a wide receiver screen. And I said, for a guy to be able to cover that much ground speaks to why he's so elite at breaking on the ball and that he's a special player. We saw that in that play. I thought that was a masterful job, not only of identifying what Penn State likes to do in that situation, but of Thieneman with a little bit of gamesmanship. I mean, he's literally squatted down behind the official as the ball is snapped, and again, leaks over to that side, knowing what the play is going to be. That was a great job by Oregon in a game-saving play that just highlights how many different things go into a game like this. So think of all the things we experienced in that game, and it comes down to kind of scouting and knowing what Penn State likes to do in that moment, and then having the player to be there to capitalize. I think it just speaks to how much goes into a win like that.
Still would like to point out that he tried to feather that ball over two
Don't
people.
do this. Don't do the Drew Aller thing.
I'm going to. He still tried to feather that ball over two defenders and put it in the honey hole in like a 15-yard window.
It was a stupid throw.
I'm not saying that, like, sometimes when you see that cover two and you see the high safety look, there's a nice window there. Again, that's the honey hole there where you're trying to throw you've got to throw in between the safety.
Thieneman just robbed that spot. I mean, he just sat in that spot.
But not only did Thieneman rob the spot, but there was another guy that he had to feather it over too. So while I give all the credit in the world to seeing that and making the play, I would also like to point out that is the Drew Aller experience. The Drew Aller experience is
you said you were done.
I'm not done. This is the Drew Aller experience. If I'm a Penn State fan, I swear to God, if I had to put together like a Disneyland ride, remember the old Michael Vick experience ad from Nike? That was like the best commercial ever. Go look it up on YouTube, right? Nike made an ad where it was like a Disneyland ride where they strap you into a chair and it like elevates. And it was called the Michael Vick experience. And then it's got the football players all around you. And it's just you in a chair just spinning around and dodging guys. And you make like a 70-yard touchdown run. And it was the Michael Vick experience. It was a really cool ad. If I had to make a ride and it was the Drew Aller experience, for 3 quarters, it would just be you getting kicked in the nuts. Just repeating like, ha!
Dude,
ha.
He's like legit 4th-round quarterback.
And then you'd have like a brief window where it would be like, great, someone would serve you like warm apple pie and ice cream and give you like an ice bag. And you're like, oh, everything's fine. And just when you're eating your pie and everything's fine, steel-toed boot right to the balls again and be like, ha, the Drew Aller experience. Welcome to the Drew Aller. I love that in that game, we got the full Drew Aller experience, not part, not quarter. We got the whole deal there. And it just, welcome to the world of Penn State. Being a Penn State football fan.
We talked about this, that we weren't going to do a whole Drew Aller thing.
Sorry,
I'm did it anyway. Oregon's defense, for what it's worth, because it doesn't matter now because you just crapped all over my point. Drew Aller is a great play. Is a decent college quarterback with some upside because of his tools. He has not put it all together, and Oregon did a phenomenal job in coverage. Penn State made a concerted effort this offseason to upgrade their receiving core. They know they went to a college football playoff game and didn't complete a pass to a receiver. They knew all their passes were completed to tight ends and running backs. And we still had long stretches of this game where they could not involve the wide receivers. And we've mentioned before, and it's clear as day, Oregon's secondary is really, really young, but incredibly talented. And the fact that they were able to shut down the passing game is not only a credit to the disruption of that defensive line, and you could go to a man, each of those 4 guys that are the starters, Uyunglele, Bear Alexander, Amari Washington, they all flashed and had major plays. So too did this secondary. Brandon Finney, Aaron Flowers, Kennedy, Dylan Thieneman, they all played really well. And so, yes, Drew Aller in this environment looked bad. By the way, his PFF grade was pretty solid. There weren't a lot of guys to throw to in this game. And so he ended up having to use his legs. I like Drew Aller infinitely better than you do, obviously. I don't know if he killed your dog or what, but He's going to be an NFL draft pick. He's not going to be a first round pick, but he's a better prospect than Shedeur Sanders. He is. He's a better prospect than Shedeur Sanders. He's a better prospect than Dillon Gabriel. He is. He has more tools. It hasn't all come together. There's still a work in progress. But I thought Oregon did a really nice job of keeping, until very late in the game, keeping Penn State really off balance and unable to really do anything. And I think if you're looking for a crowning achievement game from Dan Lanning, we said this. Oregon's won games in blowout fashion. Oregon's won games in shootout fashion. Can they win a rock fight? Can their defense hold up? They almost didn't. They almost didn't. They almost fell apart at the end with the very thing that we talked about in the preview that could be an issue. Could they stop the run for 4 quarters? We weren't sure. Well, it turns out they couldn't, but they did enough. Yeah. And so I thought this was a really good win for Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi. You've got some things to work out with that jet motion. It opened everything up. They're going to have to figure that out. That was very obvious in the second half, that motion opened things up and allowed them to run up the middle and caused a lot of problems, or even kind of like off tackle more than just directly running up the middle. But it caused some problems. Oregon's going to have to correct that. But other than that, a massive win. De'Aaron Hill is absolutely special. I think the running back rotation's figured out, with apologies to Mekhi Hughes. Have a seat. I mean, you're done, unfortunately. Oregon really did a nice job. And one little wrinkle I really liked was De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davison in the backfield together. Mm-hmm. You've got your power up the middle. De'Aaron Hill is, and one of the things that he's so good at, and I think Whittington fails at this, and we've talked about it off pod, that I don't like Jaden Lamar carries, and I haven't all year. I don't think he maximizes, and I think he guesses. I don't think he sees when to bounce outside or when to put his head down and get yardage. I think it's totally a guess. He doesn't process that that you need to. And so he's like, okay, inside, and it's not there. Or, bounce it outside. And it's like, not that time. We needed the yardage. I think De'Aaron Hill has that special ability and balance to go now, and he's out, or keep my head down and get yardage. I think he's absolutely special. And I think Oregon needs to lean into Davison and De'Aaron Hill being the guys 100%. With Whittington. And it's a 3-man thing. And you have Lamar maybe in 3rd and long, because he's pretty good at catching the ball. He's a decent receiver out of the backfield. He does a nice job of picking up blitzes. But guess what? Davison can do that as well.
And you'll see that. Running back is actually a hard position to get on the field for all 3 downs. I actually asked Dan Lanning about this. And it's you see this in the NFL a lot, where it takes backs a while. People are like, wow, he seems explosive. Why isn't he on the field? He doesn't understand the offense. And if you don't understand the offense, it's hard. You don't understand check down routes. You don't understand pass protection. There's more to that position. And as this goes on, we've said it, the 2 best players in that backfield are both freshmen. And this is what I took away from Oregon. That's a really senior, veteran-laden team over there at Penn State. And Oregon is really young. Oregon's 2 best backs, freshmen. Best receiver, freshman. 2 best corners, freshmen. This team is, and your quarterback's only started a handful of games and already looks like he may be, he certainly is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Some people I think Dan Lanning said after the game, I wouldn't take a quarterback over him in the country. And I'll listen to that conversation.
By the way, I think it's funny that we had that conversation in the postgame and said, I bet Dan Lanning would say he wouldn't trade Dante Moore for anybody. And sure enough, he actually did say it.
Yeah. And there's other coaches who would say the same thing, but he's in that conversation. It's not horse crap. It's not hyperbole. No. So Oregon's going to continue to get better. I think you do need to get better. I'm not certain. And I said this going into the game. I didn't think Penn State was the number 3 team in the country. Still not convinced they're the number 3 team in the country. But you go play in front of 111,000 people. You knew they were going to come back in and give Penn State credit when they could have rolled over and died, being down 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter when you had 109 yards of offense. And Penn State kept swinging, made that a game. Really impressed with the way Penn State came back and made that a ball game, and really impressed with the way Oregon didn't fold, because a lot of teams do fold in that situation. And yes, I said all along, I needed to see Oregon's defense, because in every one of these big games, the defense has not shown up. And I get it. 4th quarter didn't go your way, a couple of bad breaks in overtime. Your defense showed up. Your defense played freaking awesome for 90% of that game, with the exception of a handful of plays. And again, Penn State's on scholarship too, and I may not love their quarterback, but there's real players all across that offense, NFL players. And so a ton of credit to Oregon's defense for playing their ass off for 3+ quarters, and then bowing their back in the 4th and finding a way to go in and get a win. Just really, really impressed. And yeah, I think, say what you will. I mean, Ohio State at Autzen last year, Ohio State's a better team than Penn State, but you could make the argument that this is the signature win for Dan Lanning, even with the Ohio State game. This is the Big Ten title. This is the signature win of the day, and you heard it. You heard it in his voice, and you heard it in the emotions. This was the signature win, and I think the way it went down, and so the grass is really green in front of Oregon. They just are. I mean, they're without doubt, they're one of the best teams in the country. Without doubt, they are a national title contending team, and it's so young that this team will continue to get better. And there's a lot to build on. And now you get a bit of a respite, but Indiana's coming in, and I don't know if Indiana's better than Penn State. Indiana's offense is going to test you more than Penn State's will, and that's at home. So we get another one of these in a week's time. That's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, I think the other huge thing that's really important from this game, Oregon will not face a more difficult. Now, Washington's a tough road game, no doubt. They won't face a more difficult environment. And the reason is a lot of those guys hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
So now, and what's huge is they're freshmen, a lot of freshmen. So for the next 3 years, and I think this is why it mattered so much to Lanning, for the next 3 years, he will have influence in that locker room, not just his coaching staff, because he's obviously coached in some huge games. Tosh Lapoi's coached in some huge games, but players who said it can get hard, it can get really loud, and we can come out on top. And even if things aren't going well offensively for 2.5 quarters, we find a way. Trust me, I've done it. I did it. We did it in a whiteout game against one of the best teams in the country that had returned everybody. Once you have that in your locker room, you have not just coaches who tell you how to win in that situation, you have peers. And that was my big concern with this team. They had a lot of guys they were leaning on for the first time ever in a big environment. And they delivered. And again, when you have freshmen who contribute next year, the year after, when you face those tough road situations, you will have multiple players who said, we already did this. We've done this already. And by the way, when you play in the college football playoff, the crowd's split. They will not so it's 50-50. You will not face a more hostile environment, or at least a whole tier higher. Washington might be louder than Penn State, but it's in that tier. You will not for the next 3 years face anything 4 years, anything tougher. So this roster from an environment standpoint has checked that box. And that is a massive deal for the program because they can walk into any environment now for the next several years, and they'll have players in that locker room who can say, we already did this and we already won, and it was bad. We gave up 21 straight or whatever it was in overtime. We were down 7 and we found a way. We can find a way. We've done this already. We will get to listener questions. So there's more Oregon to come. There's conversations about the offensive line, Isaiah World, questions with this team going forward in terms of concerns. But before, as we leave this Oregon Penn State game and we enter the bye, I think it's a good time to look at where is this team better or worse than what we thought. And I think coming into the year, I thought they were a 10-2 team. I thought they would lose that Penn State game at the beginning of the year because they didn't have a lot of experience. And we had no frame of reference for how a Dante Moore would handle it. I was worried about the running back room. I had heard Mekhi Hughes, in preseason. I said, I don't know if Mekhi Hughes is going to be the guy. In fact, I don't even know if he's going to be a guy. So I'm worried about the running back room. We were worried about receiver. If you had to look at it and say maybe 2 or 3 positions where Oregon's better and a position or 2 where Oregon's worse, if there is one, now that we've seen 5 games and we get kind of a break in the season, where do you see this Oregon team being better or worse than what you anticipated?
Quarterback better. I thought Dante Moore was going to be good. Didn't think he'd be this good. Didn't think he'd be in the conversation for a Heisman Trophy type stuff and QB1. So just start right there. It's the most important position in all of football. Tackle, I'm going to say a little worse. I do have some concerns about the O-line. I think they've played lesser competition and they've kind of gotten away with it a little bit. I thought against Penn State, despite the offense playing well, I didn't love the way the offensive line played. I do think that Isaiah World will be a problem against elite rushers. So I that group has been good. And again, we're nitpicking because you're talking about now the number 2 team in the country, right? But I really thought early on that this O-line was going to come out and just maul, and that World was going to be a top 10 pick and that Harkey, I really liked Harkey, and I still do. I think Harkey is the better of the two tackles, but he doesn't have the best anchor in the world. It can get pushed around a little bit. And so I just say O-line, it's not as good as I thought. And the running back rotation. Again, maybe this is one as we go to the freshmen. The no Mekhi Hughes, and if it's going to be Whittington and Lamar, don't like it as much. But as this goes and we see more of the freshmen, I think I will like this maybe a little better, and defensive line better than I thought. I'll go with that. If I just in a position by position, but was really impressed. Was really, really impressed with the D-line. When we were giving out game balls, I went to the defensive line because that was a big question I had even through the first couple of weeks. I thought Penn State would be able to run on Oregon, and they couldn't. And this is a good Penn State O-line, and it's two good NFL backs, and Oregon absolutely shut that down completely. So really impressed with the D-line, and I thought that might be one where even Mateo, I knew he was good. I didn't necessarily buy into the first round stuff. To me, he was more kind of what Ohio State had last year. When you look at
more Jack Sawyer, JT
Yes.
Tuimalau than he was twitchy first round.
Yeah. I thought he was the guy that was kind of a mush rusher. Like he should go play for the Lions. I say like the mush rush, where he just kind of shoves the tackle back a little bit and maybe lacks some of that true explosiveness. And and then you look at the defensive tackles and Bear Alexander. I'm like, and Amari Washington. I know he's a freak, but as I've watched this, dude, Mateo's got some twitch and looks more top 15 pick than he does third round Jack Sawyer pick.
He's got a pass rush bag. I didn't expect him to have as deep a bag as he does.
No. And then Bear finally showed up and had a big game. And Amari Washington I know he's young and he has some glimpses where he can kind of get washed down a little bit. He's a problem. And so just this front, really, really, really impressed with Oregon's defensive line. And so that's where I would say maybe better and worse for me, what I've seen so far.
Receiving core for me, better. I just thought Gary Bryant was pretty vanilla. He's great in those crossing routes. We saw that on the last play, but that's kind of a staple for him. DeCorian Moore is more nuanced than I thought he would be already. He can do everything. He's a true wide receiver one in college from day one, which is insane. I don't think people realize how insane that is. He's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. Malik Benson, I thought, would be a guy that could, maybe take the top off a defense, like a college MVS, but he's got more to him than that. So the receiving core is better. The running back room is really weird because, as you put it, all in all, I think they're about what I thought, and I thought they'd be great. But it's none of the guys I thought it would be. I thought Whittington and Hughes, and again this summer, would be great, and they'd have depth with the freshmen. Instead, I think the freshmen are great or very, very good, and Hughes is a non-factor. Lamar's not doing much, and Whittington is fine. He's a B. I'm surprised that it breaks even, given that Mekhi Hughes, I thought, had a potential to be a Doak Walker guy, back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons, and he's not even in the rotation, and I'm still like, they're fine. The DB room is better than I thought, and not in the way you think. I think they cover as well as I thought they would. I thought they would be locked down. I didn't think they'd have this many tacklers in the group. Flowers and Kennedy can stick you. Yeah. And when those guys can, and I already knew Thieneman, and Thieneman's like All-American good. Yeah. So to have three dudes back there who can lay a wallop in run support, that's really impressive to me, and it adds an element to this defense, and we saw that against Penn State, that Flowers came up and made some big plays. Kennedy made some big plays. Thieneman was around. He almost picked up a sack in a situation where he blitzed. That has impressed me. Dante Moore's better. This O-line, and I don't know. I'll leave it to you. Do you want to get into the listener questions about the O-line now, since it makes sense, or do you want to wait till the end? Up to you.
Oh, I mean, what was the question?
So main concerns for Oregon the rest of the way, we talked about that. It's probably the offensive line. Tied with that, how concerned should Oregon fans be about Isaiah World? Are his problems fixable during the season? We got another question we've heard a lot about Isaiah World's anchor. That's something we've brought up. How fixable is that in season? I'll say this. I don't know a ton about offensive line play. Your anchor is your strength. It's how strong you are and your ability to set. So if you can't do it, it's not a thing where you go, hey man, be stronger. it means you in your core aren't necessarily strong enough to hold that edge. And that's a problem that isn't fixable in a week.
Well, here's my thing. Like, fixable. I don't know if it has to be fixable. He's not as good as we thought. I mean, let's just plain and simple.
But how fixable are his flaws in season, or is he just who he is and he's more third, fourth rounder?
I mean, at this point, I think you are who you are. I mean, yeah, you can get better, and you can get better as a group. I thought, at the beginning of last year, Oregon's line didn't play very good, and you made some situational flip arounds there, and you got a better center in there, and there was some continuity. And I thought, all of a sudden, things kind of clicked, and guys do get better. I mean, my God, it's everyone should get better. But as you go on, you can also get nicked up, you can get injured, you can get tired, all those things. I just think when I look at this and I've watched him play, he's fine. Both of these tackles are good college tackles. Isaiah World, to me, is not what he was billed as. That's what I'll say. So is it fixable? I don't know if it's fixable. Like, was I fixable if I just wasn't that good? And that's the thing. Like, we run into this thing all the time where we're like, well, he should be this, and he's not. Well, maybe he's just not that. We do all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, what can this quarterback do? And I'm not going to go back to it, but like, if there's a quarterback and you're like, how does he become Patrick Mahomes? He's not. Just not everyone's going to be great. Josh Connerly was a really, really good tackle. Isaiah World is not Josh Connerly.
And by the way, Connerly's biggest issue, and it was a minor issue, was his anchor. He wasn't considered the strongest guy. Now, he was a year younger than his class. Yeah. So because of that, there was thought in the NFL that he was still very young and could get stronger, that he wasn't the veteran who was already 22, 23 playing college ball. Yeah. And so the reason that he went still in the first round is the Commanders went, hey, we can probably add another 10, 15 pounds and improve that anchor a little bit.
And he's had his struggles in the NFL, and it's been kind of an up and down so far. But I look at World and I look at Harkey. I love Harkey's. He plays with an edge. He's nasty.
Run blocking is great.
He's run blocking is phenomenal. He can get big. He gets beat inside. Penn State beat him a couple of times on some spin. He actually had a nice recovery though, where he washed a couple guys down when he did get beat inside. He's an athletic guy. I think he's more athletic than Isaiah World. Harkey's a better tackle than World. He may not be as physically as like my God, but Harkey's a big guy too. I just think Harkey's the better of the two tackles, and I don't think either one of them are elite. I think they're both good, solid tackles. But I have not seen
mid-round, late-round guys.
I have not seen anything from World that lets me that I believe he is going to blossom into this, this elite left tackle. And I do think if you play as you get into the playoff and you're playing some nasty fronts, right? If you're playing some of these SEC fronts, and when you play Ohio State, who, by the way, really impressed me up at Washington. I really believe in Washington's offense, and Washington's offense did some things. Ohio State's got some guys. So when you play those teams, I do think that Oregon is going to have to address it, whether that is, in scheme, whether that's chipping, whether that's sliding, whether that's moving Dante Moore out. And I think Will Stein is really good, and I think they'll be able to mask that. I just don't, as I said, if you ask me one area that I thought was going to be elite, and I just think it's good, I think it's the offensive line. I think this is a good offensive line. I don't think it's an elite offensive line. Will it become elite? I don't think so. But again, we're nitpicking here because I think Harkey in run blocking is elite. I think his athleticism is elite. I just think he is sloppy a little bit in technique and he can get beat. But by the way, those guys that he's playing against Penn State, they're NFL guys.
Yeah, Dennis Sutton is right on par with Uiagalelei. It just depends on your flavor.
So sometimes, when, as my coach always said, hey, they get scholarships too. I played Dwight Freeney when I was in college. Guess what? I mean, Jesus.
That's an all-time freak.
Yeah, I just, I played Brian Urlacher, and we were like, oh, well, this is happening. And I mean, Darnell Dockett at Florida State. I mean, I remember some of these guys. Andre Carter when I played against, when we played at Cal.
Yeah.
Washington had some guys. And Jason Chorak, who didn't go on to do anything in the NFL, but was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. I remember playing against some of these guys, and you're like, Michael Myers was my first game at Alabama. I was a freshman. I played against Michael Myers. He went on and played for the Cowboys, and I just remember being like, what do you want me to do with that one? I don't know. That guy's just better. So, don't judge this based on that. But I do think that it showed a little bit that, maybe it's not quite where we thought it would be at this point, but you can get better, and there's not many better fronts than you'll play than Penn State.
I really want to caution people with Isaiah World. This is something that I brought up a few times with Isaiah World, including this offseason, and said you have to be careful with that 0 sack number because there are underlying numbers. 1, competition's not very good. 2, sometimes teams emphasize getting rid of the ball very quickly. And 3, Isaiah World was one of the most penalized tackles in the country. Now, where that comes from is holding and false starts. And people think false starts are purely just, nerves and you jump. Sometimes guys are jumping because they're worried they're not quick enough to get out and push that defensive end. You can't see my hand, but push that defensive end out around the quarterback. You can't get out there in time. So you're kind of cheating. You're trying to jump the count, jump the snap to quicken how quickly you can get out. Isaiah World had a lot of penalties, and that wasn't lost on people who evaluated him in the draft. And this is why I follow draft coverage way more than I follow a lot of college football coverage, because draft guys won't lie to you.
No.
They don't care. They have to be right about how good a player is. And their thing with World is he's concerned about his own ability to get out. You can tell because of the false starts. And instead of giving up sacks, he holds. And we saw that against Dennis Sutton. They just didn't call it. But we saw that 2 or 3 times where rather than give up the sack against Dante Moore, he just flat out hooked Dennis Sutton. And luckily they just didn't call it. No. But Isaiah World had some underlying concerns. And I think rather than do this whole thing, and I do think Oregon fan has a tendency to protect its own when you not are critical, when you analyze. If you go deeper than like Marcus Mariota, I said Marcus Mariota when he was coming out, like he's got some real flaws. And one of them is he doesn't throw to tight windows. He's got a high completion percentage because Oregon's offense leaves guys open. He's not good at ball placement. He's accurate, yes. Ball placement's different. It's leading the receiver. It's knowing when to hit the back shoulder. It's, again, the tight window throws. He's probably not going to make it because of those flaws. And people were mad. You're an idiot. Marcus Mariota is the greatest quarterback ever. There's a different conversation when we're talking NFL accurate and college accurate. There's a different conversation when we're talking NFL anchor and college anchor. And that's in part why I've challenged myself to go into more draft world and try to understand that, because it does help you frame things a little better. And Isaiah World had some real issues. I think Isaiah World is fine. I think he's a later round guy. The idea that he was ever supposed to really be a top 10 or 15 pick, that just wasn't really there. Compare him to like Joe Alt. It's a whole different thing.
So fixable, it's not, that's, you're not,
he is fixable. Not fixable. He's fine.
Not fixable. He's fine. I keep saying that he's fine, but the O-line's fine. It's just not, I thought this would be maybe, one of the better groups in the country. And I don't think it's
they're a B+ or A-. Yeah. Most schools would kill to have Oregon's O-line with Emmanuel Pregnon and Harkey.
We're nitpicky here. Just is.
Right. We got another question relating to the O-line. Then we'll get into Washington. We also got a question about Oregon State, and I think we're good to wrap at that point. I guess it's not really a question, but would like to hear Suke talk about playing in an O-line, playing as an O-lineman in an environment like Penn State. The only false starts came from the tight ends. That seemed like that had to do with Poncho and his ability to kind of guide things. I guess if you could speak to that in that environment, how offensive line handles it, and maybe why Oregon was so effective with Poncho's leadership.
Well, certainly, when you're playing in front of 111,000 people, I mean, it's going to be tough. By the way, I also thought that for much of that game, the crowd wasn't a factor because they took him out of it. I mean, the easiest way to shut up a crowd, let's not, give everyone, I can't say what I was going to say. Let's not all start, rubbing each other's backs. Like for most of that game, the crowd wasn't
good censor there.
The crowd wasn't a huge factor. It just wasn't. Oregon took him out of the game. I mean, it was coming out of it. It was like, oh my God. And then in the fourth quarter, it was buzzing, but
they started chanting "Fire Franklin."
Yeah. So, I mean, I just thought some of that stuff, the pregame about the whiteout, who gives a shit? I promise you, never once have I gone into a game, and I've played in plenty of hostile environments. I've never played at Penn State, but I played at Florida State and Notre Dame and Alabama and old Husky Stadium. Played plenty of places. Seen the Metrodome in the NFL with the Vikings, and been to plenty of loud environments. I can assure you, no one's ever given two rips about what someone's wearing. It's a loud crowd. Like, it's going to be loud. There's energy. There's buzz. But you can also feed off of it too. So really, the only negative is you got to make sure that momentum doesn't steamroll you. I thought that happened a little bit at the end, where the other team can get a fire lit under their ass, and then just communication. And I thought Oregon had a great system of communication. Also, so much of college football now is silent counts anyways. And it's not like you're up at the line and you're completely audibly in any ways. College offenses aren't nearly as detailed. This isn't Matthew Stafford up there, orchestrating everything, and Peyton Manning. So I do think it's easier to navigate at the college game. And then I do a ton of credit when you've got a guy who I think is one of the best centers in the country, and you've got veteran-laden guys that have played in a lot of games. I thought they did a great job of handling the crowd noise. Again, no false start penalties. You get off the ball maybe a half a tick slower, and that could also be why maybe some of the tackles had issues dealing with the elite Penn State rushers, because you do kind of have to go on a silent count for a lot of that. So I just think at times we love to do the, oh man, how are they going to function? They'll function. Good players function in hostile environments, and that's not the first time you've played in front of a loud crowd where it's hard to hear. And honestly, at some point, if you've played in front of 70,000 people, there's not a big difference playing in front of 70 and playing 100 and playing in front of 100. Loud is loud, right? Playing at Autzen, playing at Husky Stadium, it's loud. Which one's louder? Well, this one's 110 decibels versus 104. I promise you, anything over 80 decibels, you can't hear shit anyways, right? And so it is what it is. But now we have in-helmet communication. You got hand signals. They were doing it with Poncho instead of looking under. It was the guard that was looking back. Let Poncho know. I thought the most important thing was, I thought they were doing kind of the double bead thing where he would touch Poncho and then Poncho would kind of pause, and whether it was, hey, we're waiting 1 count, 2 count, that was honestly the most impressive thing to me. It felt like, and again, I'm not in their huddle, I don't know what their thing was, but it felt like there were times where they were going on 2, right? Because it's one thing if every time a center looks under and then comes up and rests a beat and snaps it, or the guard is touching him and then coming back, you can time it as a D lineman. And I thought Oregon actually did a really nice job of varying. And again, I don't know how exactly they went about this, but it wasn't every time that the guard would turn, touch Poncho, and then Poncho would pick his head up and snap. They seemed to vary that, and yet the old line was all on the same page and kind of went at the same time. So I give credit, whatever system they were coming up with that for communication, it just wasn't an issue. And up until the end, when the crowd, I think, gave Penn State life, I just don't think it was a huge issue for Oregon. They handled it real well, and they took the crowd out of it early, and I just think it was a non-factor. But again, I think we love the narrative, right? We love to, and they go to the sidelines. God, they talked about it for a half hour pregame. I promise you, inside that locker room, everyone was like, dude, whatever. And you saw them, they're coming out, and they're, dude, they're just players love that. It's just not, because as much as Penn State feeds on it, there's nothing better in this world than shutting a crowd up. And I did not think that was going to be a factor where Oregon was going to wilt in front of that crowd. A Dan Lanning team, I don't believe is going to go in there and wilt, and they didn't.
Switching gears, Washington, Ohio State. Ohio State picks up the win, 24-6. I got to be honest, I thought Washington played really well early in that game. I thought they had some opportunities to take a lead early, and when they didn't capitalize, and this in some ways was similar to the Oregon game, except Oregon was just more well-equipped to take on Penn State. When they didn't capitalize early, that proved to be a death blow, because as the game went on, they weren't the better team, and Ohio State slowly wore them down. Felt like they could have been up 10-0, 13-0 early, and when they didn't, put them behind the 8 ball, and Ohio State does what Ohio State does. Jeremiah Smith did what he did, and then this defense proved that it isn't just Texas. They are legitimately an elite group.
Yeah, I believe in the Washington offense, and you're going to see 24-6 if you're a Husky fan. And if you didn't watch the game, maybe you come away from this being like, oh my God, I don't take this as a negative. I did not expect Washington to win this game. I am a little disappointed at the 6 points. I think this was a game where maybe Jedd Fisch sometimes gets in Jedd Fisch's own way. That was the most ridiculous fake field goal call I've ever seen in my entire life. 4th and 14, and you're in this game and you decide to do that. What are you doing? That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't love that Jonah Coleman only got 13 carries. He had 13 carries for 70 yards. And I get they had the 30-yard run, but dude, you're averaging 5 yards a carry with, I think, is outside of Hardy and maybe Justice Haynes at Michigan. You're one of the 3 best backs in the country. I didn't love the game plan. I also think that when Carver Willis got hurt and Durfee, your best O lineman who has been great for you, and then really the one real difference maker you have on your defensive line, I thought that was enormous. I thought the whole tenor of the game changed at that point. Takario Davis was already out. But if I told you for Washington that your best defensive player was going to be out all game, and that your one real difference maker up front was going to leave early in the game, and you were going to be in a 1-score game with the number 1 team in the country into the fourth quarter, that's a 1-score game.
Yeah,
right. It's 14-6 going into the fourth quarter.
Right.
Like, you would take that. And yes, I know the damn burst, but you only gave up 10 in the fourth quarter. So I think there's a lot of positive you can take out of this. Damon Williams was 18 of 22 for $173 and completed, I think, 14 passes. Now, again, were all of those downfield, but no, one of those drives that you went down there, I completed 5 straight. There were some, 15 to 20 yard passes. I think Damon Williams, again, has to find a way to limit the negative plays. They had 6 sacks, and a lot of those are on him, where I think he just sometimes you just rip the ball, get it out of your hands, and live to fight another day. And that's something that as a freshman is going to drive you crazy. But there is so much to like about Washington. But I was really impressed with Washington's defense for hanging in. And so I took this as a positive. Washington is 3-1. I still think this is a top 25 team in the country. I think they're going to win a lot of games. I think they're going to get a pelt on the wall. They're going to beat someone that everyone's going to be like, I didn't see that coming. Washington is a good team.
Agreed.
And Ohio State's defense is legit. And you're right. I was wondering where Ohio State's defense was at. I remember that Ohio State defense last year coming into Austin and hearing all the things in Washington or Oregon cooked them. And I kind of thought this game was going to be more, I thought Washington was going to lose. This one had like 38-28 kind of written on it for me, maybe 31-25, something like that. And it wasn't. I mean, it was 7-3 at the half, and was like, God, didn't see that coming. So credit to Washington, and I think they just wore down. Credit to Ohio State for doing a great job of limiting what I think is a really, really good offense. And 2 things can be true at the same time. Ohio State is legit. We know they've now beat Texas. They beat Washington on the road. Julian Sain looks really good. They've got some stud backs, much like Oregon. Some of their best players are young guys. They're going to continue to grow. And it wouldn't shock me if we saw Ohio State and Oregon when this is all said and done, much like we did last year, and winner may win a national championship. So a lot to like from that. And again, I think if you're Washington, I don't take this as a negative. You knew that you probably weren't on par with the top teams in the country, and you're not. But you did prove, shorthanded, that you can go toe-to-toe for 3 quarters with Ohio State. And they're going to go back and watch that film and say, guys, that could have been a tie game, or we could have had the lead.
We left 10 points on the board easily, and it was 14-6 going into the fourth quarter. It could have easily been 16-14 Washington.
And, and it's one of those things that ultimately, do I think, that Ohio State wears them down? Yes. Coming out of the half, they went on that just death march. It was like 8 minutes, I think like a 15 play drive. And it was like, okay.
It was a tone setting, game changing, physical drive. They
just said, we're, sorry, but at this point we're the big brother. And that's what elite teams are going to do to lesser teams. And, they didn't give up explosive plays. In fact, the only real explosive play Ohio State had was Washington, for whatever reason, on like a 3rd and long, they sent the house, and they got the ball to this Jeremiah Smithy. They've got some receiver over there. I don't know what his name is. Turns out he's really good, and you probably shouldn't get him the ball into open field. God, Jeremiah Smith is good. And, he picked it and went and did Jeremiah Smith things.
But even that was a 19-yard gain. Their longest gain on offense was 19 yards. Now, they decided once those 2 guys got hurt, Durfee and Willis, that we'll just win the rock fight. Yeah, we don't need to have explosives. But still, it speaks to sure tackling. Yeah. It speaks to the ability of the secondary not to let anything over the top when multiple guys were out. They had a couple different guys out. And Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are the best 1-2 punch at receiver. And the
Really.
long given up for the whole defense for the whole game was 19 yards. That's really impressive. I mean, that is a sign of growth for a program that had ups and downs, serious ups and downs last year. I was really encouraged, and people will look at the score and say, you guys are being like pro Washington.
No,
dude, this is a Washington team that currently isn't ranked, playing the number one team in the nation. And they were down 1 score going into the fourth quarter. When that happens, there are takeaways. And by the way, had Oregon lost to Penn State, I would have said this was a tough environment. They got tired late. They got, but they're still a very good team, and there's a lot of good takeaways. I felt the same about had Oregon lost as with Washington in this situation, in the sense that they were right there, and they hadn't really been tested with this nucleus before in a big game like this to say, okay, we think we're pretty good. How good are we? And I think they have an answer. We still need to get tougher in the trenches. We knew that. We talked about it in the preseason, that Washington has all the skill guys in the world. Are they good enough in the trenches to compete at a high level? Not yet, but I think they will be. And by the way, part of that was because guys were hurt.
Yeah. And the big one, and I'm trying to look right and see, I haven't seen, Durfee has an injury history, and that'll be a blow, but really Carver Willis has been a revelation for them. This O-line,
huge.
This O-line last year for Washington was putrid. I thought it was one of the worst in the country. And coming over from Kansas State, he was good. But it wasn't like, I mean, both of the Oregon kids that came in had much bigger hype around him. And I think Willis has been the better of those 3 players coming over. And he has just been a real stabilizing force. And I thought when he went out, both of those guys went out. I just thought it was a blow. But
his impact to me, not the same level draft prospect.
Yeah.
His impact is a lot like Derek Harmon for Oregon's D-line last year. A guy that came in that was like an honorable mention, second team all conference guy, who then came in and made the defensive line, brought it cohesively together. They became a good group rather than a group with questions. Yeah. Listen, I'm not saying he's Derek Harmon as a draft prospect. He went in the first round, but just insert guy who's like, not an All-American, and he suddenly makes everyone around him better. I thought in that way, Carver Willis reminds me a little bit of the Harmon initiative.
Yeah, and we'll see. Both going through MRI. Willis, Durfee's looked a little more like Durfee looked down. Remember when Nick Bosa got hurt and he looked at Durfee, who's battled some injuries, he looked pretty dejected on the sideline. His is an elbow. Willis's was a knee, but I saw him walking around, and it wasn't like there was like a big brace on it. There wasn't an ice pack. So fingers crossed that everything's fine there. They're both going MRIs today, so we'll find out. Tacario Davis needs to come back. But I thought playing without your best cover corner and one of the better ones in the country, I just thought that was a really nice performance. And to me, when I look at Washington and I look ahead with Maryland, Rutgers, and then Michigan, Illinois, which again, those are going to be, to me, you're not where Ohio State is. I think Washington on the road at Michigan and then home against Illinois. By the way, kudos to Illinois for bouncing back and showing me something, although USC, the hell, man. But like when I look at Washington and I look at, and I said this at the start of the year, I think there could be a meaningful game at the end of the year against Oregon. I look at Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Purdue, and UCLA. If this is the Washington team that can stay healthy, because I do think depth is going to be an issue for them, just is. Anytime you're building a program, it's a problem. It was a problem for Oregon 3-4 years ago when Lanning got here, right? And now we're seeing it where you can withstand some injuries. Washington needs to stay healthy. But if this team continues to grow and continue to develop and you build some of that depth and Damon Williams kind of cleans up some of the ticky-tack stuff and Jed Fish gets out of his own way, turn and hand the ball to number one, for God's sakes.
Turns out he's good.
Yeah, turns out he's good. And so I just think there's a lot of wins. And so I think there's a chance that Washington is a 2, maybe a 3-loss team going into that game against Oregon. And that game could have real implications. So this does not sour me on Washington. And again, I don't have a dog in any fight. If anything, I mean, God, I do radio in Portland. If anything, I should be shitting all over the Huskies. But I don't. I try to be impartial. I call it as I see it. And I think for a 24-6, first off, I don't think it was indicative of where that game went. The 10 points at the end was just that a team got worn down. And that's a really good Ohio State team.
Yeah.
Hats off to Ohio State. if that's the Washington team that stays healthy, there is a lot of wins and there will be meaningful football games played up in Seattle this year. And again, the future I think is bright as long as Jed Fish sticks around, and that's a whole other thing. But we'll see. I was for the two teams that I thought were going to need to be kind of elevated for the Big Ten to really kind of pop and not just be Oregon, Penn State, and
Ohio State.
I really thought Washington, USC had a chance, and it's funny, both lost, and USC's loss was close. I came way more optimistic about Washington than I did against USC. I was just really disappointed in what USC put out there. And I know it ended up coming down to the wire, but that was because of two fumbles. One of them I don't think was a fumble with Illinois. And I'm not saying
that. Yeah, if you didn't watch that game, by the way, it's really important to say. It came down to the last thing, and USC scored, and everyone, to give you an idea how bad USC's defense was, they scored with 2 minutes-ish left. I don't know exactly.
And you knew what was going to happen.
Everyone said on Twitter, it was just like, they scored too soon. Yeah. Illinois is just going to go down and win. And what'd they do? They went down and won. It was embarrassing, and Illinois fumbled twice going into the end zone, on their way into the end zone, losing the ball. So those are that's 14 points. Literally, they're going over the goal line as they fumble. Yeah. Those are literally 14 points taken off the board for Illinois. They should have beat this USC team by 2 or 3 scores. Yeah. And it's inexcusable. It's absolutely inexcusable for Lincoln Riley this long in to have these problems with physicality, these problems in coverage. They are soft. USC, you are freaking soft. You should not have gone into the Big Ten. And by the way, this bothers the hell out of me when it comes to USC and UCLA. The hubris it takes to leave for the Big Ten and have the runway. Oregon and Washington kind of had to jump and follow, and they had to make that move a little quicker. USC had time, and they had time to recruit in the trenches and emphasize the trenches. And USC and UCLA to some extent, although they don't have the same resources, thought we have so much skill and so much speed. We're just going to go in and throw the ball around and beat the heck out of the Big Ten because they're a bunch of cavemen who can't run around and aren't they're physical, but they don't have any speed. And they've now gone to the Big Ten, and it's now been into the second and third year that they're here, and they're not physically built to compete in the Big Ten. And not only did they not know going in, which is hubris, they then were punched in the mouth their first year in the Big Ten and still haven't fixed it. It's inexcusable. Lincoln Riley, get your shit together. This is embarrassing.
And I know what Indiana did to Illinois, and so this is you can't just be like, well, Illinois sucks. No, we thought Illinois was good, and they got embarrassed in Indiana, and give Illinois credit for bouncing back. But a defense that we saw take a big step last year and shave off about 10 points per game, and we're told that this was going to be better. They stopped Illinois once all game on a punt. The other 2 drives that Illinois didn't score, the only 2 drives where they didn't score, one was like a 68-yard drive with a fumble, and one was an 88-yard drive with a fumble. They didn't stop Illinois. Well, they stopped them one time. They had 1 3-and-out where I think there was a penalty.
Entire game.
And Illinois shot themselves in the foot. And I get it. Illinois is a decent team. But my God, you couldn't bow your back. Well, I keep saying one time in the second quarter, you bowed your back. Every other drive that Illinois had, they scored other than just fumbling. Again, one of those I'm not convinced was a fumble, including the one at the end where you were given a gift and your offense, which is good, right? And they were playing without one of their best receivers, although he played some spot duty. They brought in Lane there and
Jacoby Lane. Yep.
Jacoby Lane and kind of put him in kind of as a spot guy. I think it was more of a
decoy than anything.
More of a decoy. I mean, I had a couple catches, but he wasn't 100% healthy. But you were given a gift and your offense went down and found a way. I thought to myself, all right, you played like crap on defense. You were given a gift and you went down and you scored. Hats off. You found a way to win ugly. And then you sat there, and you're right. There was like a minute 50 something left on the clock. And you're like, oh my God, they're going to go ahead and piss this away. And the defense won't show up again. And it's just, that has to be maddening that given that gift, you still couldn't find a way to come up with one stop. And that's kind of the same old. And we'll see where USC goes. Again, I give Illinois credit. That's on the road. That's tough. But USC now has Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska, all in a row here. Those are all three teams that are going to test you physically. And I need to see USC, just like I said with Penn State, I need your offense to show up and I need Oregon's defense to show up. Like there's just certain groups that like I'm waiting in big games for you to prove to me that that you've improved.
How high is your ceiling? You need to be better than your normal Achilles heel.
And USC, I know USC's offense is good and USC is going to put up points, but same old. Prove to me you can play defense, because the next two teams that you're playing, they're not the most offensive-minded teams in the country. I mean, both can do some stuff, but it's not like Michigan or Notre Dame should absolutely overwhelm you. So just disappointed in the first real test for USC, and I thought they failed it miserably on the defensive side of the ball, and I had higher hopes. I
think it's embarrassing that in that situation as a coach, you know who you are at that point. You haven't stopped them all game. The only times you stopped them, one stop and then fumbles at the goal line, or else you'd be down more. There's 2 minutes left, the 2-minute warning. The play out of the 2-minute warning, they throw kind of a goal, into the end zone, a 16-yard-ish, I think 16-yard fade to Mekhi Lemon. That's the wrong play call. Yes, it ended in a touchdown. It also cost you the game. Run the ball. Yeah. Chew clock. To throw to the end zone in that situation is absolutely stupid. It's stupid play calling. Because the best thing that can happen is you score and give the ball back to Illinois with 1:55 left.
Knowing that they only need a field goal. Dumb. And you haven't stopped them. You haven't stopped them once.
So you run the football. You run the football and you score with 45-ish, 30 seconds left. Yes. So you limit their opportunities. Throwing to the end zone is, again, the way they've evaluated, the way they've recruited is hubris. The way they play called this game was stupidity. Yeah. It's stupidity. You do not. And there is something to be said for scored too early. It's not soccer, right? People say that in soccer and it's like kind of a joke. In football, that's real. Yeah. You got to be careful how quickly you score. Yep. And so you run the ball and you dictate clock or make them use timeouts to give themselves time so that they're sped up. They had 1:55 with timeouts. They ran the ball. Illinois ran the ball down the field for some of those plays because they had so much time. That's on USC.
The first two plays coming out of that were an 8 and a 9-yard run.
Right.
Coming out of that. And I'm with you. And they were on the 16. They could have actually gotten a first down. I was thinking to myself, dude, I was like, this is one of those that you can bleed the clock and literally score a touchdown with, get down, because you see at USC had timeouts too. Pick up another first down and then literally have it where you have 3 plays, you have 3 shots from inside the 5, and you put it in the end zone with each one and be like, we're going to have 3 clocks and give you 3 shots of this and give Illinois no time. I was thinking the exact same thing. I was sitting there watching that game and they scored that from the 16 or 17 and just thought to myself, dude, guaranteed Illinois goes right down the field on this and wins the game, especially only needing a field goal. And again, you're seeing this more in the NFL now where it's like, hey, yeah, we could kick a field goal here to go up by 8 or kick a field goal to go up by 7, or we can just try to, it's 4th down. We'll just go for it and bleed the clock. The NFL has come to this sort of conclusion that giving the ball back to the other team with a minute and something in timeouts is kind of a death sentence. And I just am surprised that Lincoln Riley, with as bad as their defense had played, that never occurred to him.
Didn't even cross his mind.
To come out and try to grind some of that clock away. But
listener question from Super Greg: has it ever been this bad for Oregon State, and how do they get out of it? If you didn't watch, Oregon State, there's no other word for it, pretty much dominated Houston.
They were better than Houston,
which was great. They were up 24-10 with about 7 minutes left, and I think they had like a 4th and 3 near midfield. They elected to punt. Houston scored twice and ended up pulling out the victory in overtime. 2 blocked field. There was some weird stuff in this game. Houston, both before the half and at the end of the game, called timeouts thinking they'd get the ball back. Yeah. And instead they used those Oregon State essentially used those timeouts to march down the field. Yeah. And it's like, Houston, stop. Stop. Yeah. You're setting them up for points. And both times Oregon State got field goal attempts, once before the end of the half and to win the game as a final. And again, Houston's calling timeouts as Oregon State's. It was insane. And both kicks were blocked. Again, massive special teams nightmares. And then as Houston, again, not understanding timeouts. Houston in overtime to kick the game winner gets up there, and they called a timeout on their own kicker, kicking the game winner. They iced their own kicker. The Houston coach has no idea how timeouts work. None whatsoever.
And yet Oregon State still lost the game.
Oregon State still lost.
2 games. If you want a glass half full thing, you were better than Fresno State and you were better than Houston. So,
yep.
But
has it ever been this bad?
It has
0-5 for the first time since 1996. They've been relegated to not being in a power conference, and their coach very likely is going to be fired at some point.
Look, it's not
in the
great.
next year or so.
It's not great. I can't spin it. I do think they have the wrong guy. If it's me, I'm already planning my next iteration of this. I've said a million times. I think they need to clean house top to bottom. I think they need a complete reset. I think they need new expectations. I think they got to stop the woe is me crap. I think they have to try to rebuild themselves in an image of a Pat Hill at Fresno State or what Boise State, I think ultimately is what you're trying to do. I think Washington State is way further along in this process than what you are. So I'm not trying to sugarcoat this, but no, this is not as bad as it's been. I'm telling you, growing up here in the Pacific Northwest, my brother played at Washington State. I've been to games at Reser Stadium, old Reser, where there was, literally 9 people in the stands. It was so bad, the Pettibone era. Yeah. I've said it. When I was getting recruited, Mike Riley was coming in right in my senior year, and their recruiting pitch to me was, and look, I was a good recruit. I wasn't getting recruited by, like, at the time, Nebraska was like the best team in the country, but I could have played most places on the West Coast, and some of that I got recruited by like Penn State and places like that. I was the Tacoma News Tribune Northwest Nugget. So I was like one of the 15 best players in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. So I was a decent recruit.
That's a big deal.
Right. I don't know if that makes me a 3, 4. I don't know.
It would have made you a high 3, low 4, probably.
There you go. So I was
you're an interior lineman too, right?
Yeah. Those guys
are almost never 4. So you'd have been a high 3, low 4.
There you go. Like so is the decent recruit. And Oregon State just flat out said, you don't want to come here. We know you're not going to come here. If you get hurt, you can come play here. That was their sales pitch. Not, hey, we build guys, we develop guys, not come look at our place. No, if you blow out your knee and no one else wants you,
if it gets bleak,
be a beef. That's, that was the pitch. Yeah. So no. And your facilities were trash. Honestly, Old Gill, where the locker rooms were some of the worst things I'd ever seen in my entire life. And so you have a really nice stadium. You have criminally underrated facilities.
Yeah.
They really are nice.
24/7 ranked them 25th or 24th in the country like 3 years ago. They're really good, like legitimately great facilities.
When it's cooking there, it's a good fan base, right? So no, this is bad. Is it? And the Pac-12 thing, yes, that's bad. That you've been, I know your new TV deal is going to pay you somewhere between $6 and $10 million. That sucks, and that hurts in this new age of college football. So, but has it been this worse? Yes, you do not have to be irrelevant. And I still think that there's a path forward for you. And I wouldn't have said that if you would have told me when I was 16, 17, coming in and looking at schools to go to, if you would have told me at one point that Oregon State would have been the second or third best team in the Pac-10 and that they would, I think over a 10-year period, they had the second most wins in the conference behind Oregon, and that they were putting guys into the NFL, I would have laughed at you. So, you went from a smoking crater to a nice, really solid, respectable program. And you still now have a much better foundation to build on than you had all those years ago. So I still think you're one good hire away, right? I would fire everybody and just top to bottom reset, but you're one good hire away from being able to be one of, if not the best team in your new conference. And that still gives you playoff access. And so no, that's the way I can paint this. It is you've been through hard times and you got through them, and it's going to be a little harder to dig your way out now because of your situation with the conference and the financial constraints and the new world of NIL. Certainly that's hard, but other schools Washington State, Fresno State, Boise State, UNLV, they're all dealing with the same thing you are. So you just maybe have to change your expectations for what digging your way out of this hole is, because you're not going to be able to get back to where you were 15 years ago when Mike Riley had this thing rolling, or Dennis Erickson. But again, if I told you that you could find a way to build Boise State or a Boise State light, you wouldn't take that right now, and you wouldn't say that that's a good exit strategy, because I do think that that's feasible. Why can't you build what Boise built in Corvallis versus Boise? You can't. You just have to. You got to find the right guy.
There are two kinds of Oregon State fan, and I've joined Twitter Spaces to talk with Oregon State fan twice now here in the last little bit. By the way, the second time, somebody had porn on in the background and then had to quickly mute their porn, which was really weird. Yeah. But there's two types of Oregon State fan. There's Oregon State fan who I think understands the reality that, they're no longer in the Power Four and they're not going back. And then there's Oregon State fan who's still in like, we got left behind and this is stupid and there's no path and this is pointless and athletics is over because even when we get good players, they're going to leave. I understand both sides.
There's a middle ground. There has to be.
But you have to understand that then don't play. Then just pack it up if you're going to be in that space. Because there is a world where they're going to be, in terms of recruiting rankings and facilities and all that, they're going to be the flagship program, them in Washington State in the Pac-12. Yes. And there are inherent advantages to that. I called Dave Bartu for a very specific reason for this part. I asked him, how often does a team that recruits better than another team win the game? And he said 72%. Well, Oregon State's going to be a better recruiter than almost everyone else in their conference. So if they just play to the odds, and by the way, that's like year in, year out, it's at least 66 to 72 every year. In some years, it can be higher than that. So they have a chance in conference to win at about a 70, 80% clip. And in the good years,
just playing to the standard,
you can be Boise State or Fresno State. And that's not being an outlier. That's playing to the mathematic standard of what happens when you're the better recruiter. Yeah. So there's a path here, but you have to move. And I want to be very careful with this. And I intentionally ran this by you before we started the pod, because I think it enters into kind of dangerous territory. I feel comfortable reporting that they have players who play on this roster who are now back channeling, finding their next spot.
Sure.
That's happening now.
Yeah. Well, 0-5 will do that.
So to think like, let's hang on to Bray because things don't fracture within the roster, or we can hang on to this roster. There are players who play who are already reaching out to find back channels for going to their next stop. Yeah. So things are bad. Pretending they're not and saying, we're fine, just a tough schedule. No. Your special teams, and I've always said this with any job, look for outliers, either good or bad. Yeah. And if you have a situation where you have an extreme bad outlier, something is wrong. Yeah. If you have an extreme good outlier, capitalize, invest. Yeah. Their special teams, high school up to the NFL, is the worst I've ever seen in any scenario ever. That's attention to detail. That's a 0.00 outlier. Something's wrong. 0.001 outlier. Something is wrong. Trent Bray dropped an F-bomb in his halftime interview. He also cussed in this one. I don't know if you caught that. In the postgame, he cussed again and had to apologize for swearing in his postgame presser again. That's a point, because he was told, I'm sure of it. I don't know that. I'm not reporting it. But you say the F-bomb, you're going to get told, clean that up. Yeah. So to swear again in a postgame, you start to enter into that 0.001 outlier in coach behavior. That, hey, we told you to clean it up. You cussed again. When you start stacking 0.001 outliers, it's time to make a change because it means your situation is bad. Their situation is bad. They have to make a move, and pretending like things are okay is a mistake. They should not have lost to Houston. They should not have lost to San Diego State. The game plan was bad for Cal, Texas Tech, and Oregon. It is what it is. Yeah. But don't pretend like you're holding this thing together by keeping Bray and keeping the assistants. Because there are some kids looking around. Yeah. And there are kids reaching out, trying to figure out how to get to their next spot already. So before it gets worse, make moves. Go get a young, energetic coach who's willing to recruit and do well. And I talked to somebody today that covers recruiting in this region, that knows recruits in the region, that is at the camps, goes to 7-on, knows all the coaches, knows all the trainers. And he said, as bad as it is on TV at 0-5, it's that bad in recruiting and in the other areas too. Pulling offers from good kids and then chewing out their parents because the kid's disloyal, that's not okay. That's not an okay thing to do. Not offering kids that are clear offer kids and being like the 7th to offer after Boise State, Nevada, and UNLV. It might suck to hear this. That's who you are right now. Yeah. And that's not really fair, but you're an 0-5 team that's not in the Power 4. Yeah. So you can't go around swinging it around like you're that much better than Nevada, UNLV, and Boise State for the kids you're offering. So the in-state kids should get offers first from you. And that sucks, but go through the history. Trevon Bradford and going back all the way from there on up, when they've gotten those in-state kids, Tegan Quatoriano, when they've gotten those kids, a lot of times, Luke Musgrave, it's been that they offered first and built the relationship. And so they could overcome some of the difficulties of being at Oregon State. They're not doing that. They're not taking advantage of that. The Northwest Showcase was this summer. And Dan Lanning speaks at it every year. Washington, not Chris Peterson, Jiminy Christmas. What am I doing? Kalen DeBoer spoke at it. The last 2 Oregon State coaches, Dickert and Rogers, spoke at it. Oregon State declined to be a guest speaker this year. It's all the top kids in the state. Those are little things that start stacking up where you go, this isn't going the way it's supposed to go. So Oregon State needs to make a change. I don't know if I would do it right this second, but I would do it soon. Because it's obvious they're not addressing that 2 blocked field goals as badly as they were blocked means you just don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. And at this point, again, make a move, get a young, energetic coach who wants to recruit this region and lean into, we're going to develop guys and we're going to play the best players right away. And yeah, maybe you can, you know what? If you want to go to Washington and develop for 3 years before you play, do that. But you know what? You can come to Oregon State and we'll play you from day one. And if you're good enough, we're going to help you find your next spot. So you play here for 2 years, you play here for a year, at least you're getting a year of a good player, as opposed to let's get guys who we know we can keep for 4 years. And that's the same mentality that went with your head coaching hires. And guess what that led you to? Nothing. The guys that are good enough to leave are going to leave anyway. And the guys that aren't good enough to leave are going to bring your program further down. Well, now they're recruiting in that way. You have to stay for 4 years. If you're here, you need to be here. You need to be committed here. And if you want to climb higher than this, don't come here. Well, how's that doing in terms of roster development? Not well. So no, things are not the worst they've ever been. They could get worse. They can get worse even if the record gets better because you don't have the guy. And the longer you go kicking the can down the road without having the guy, the worse it's going to get and the longer it takes to rebuild because the more saturated those bad habits get into your program. So that's what I would say is it can get worse even if they win against App State or Tulsa or Wake Forest or whatever, because you're being inactive and you're accepting what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is an outlier, the likes of which in terms of attention to detail, we have not seen from Oregon State in a very, very long time.
Valid points.
That'll do it for us this week, Suke. Not this week. That'll do it for us for this episode.
Today.
We'll be back later in the week to preview some action, to talk a little bit about NFL because we haven't in a while. But that'll do it for us. You probably got jits to go. You got to go wrestle grown men, right?
We'll see what happens. I'm going to start fighting exclusively children from now on to make it easier for myself.
We did a live stream after the Penn State game. It's well over 2,000 views. I just want to thank everybody for that. That's incredible. This is brand new for us, and we're going to slowly build. But to see 2,000 views in 24 hours on
appreciate it, everybody.
Was awesome. Subscribe to the podcast in general on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, YouTube. Leave comments, do the 5-star thing. It really helps us out. And to everybody who asked questions, thank you. We're not getting paid for this. We're doing this because we genuinely just love talking sports and talking teams in this area. So we share your passion, and we hope that comes across with what we're doing. Suke, we're out.
Catch you on the road.